So is the BJP right in really opening or demanding a probe in this case at this point of time? Joining us now is Aman Sinha, leader BJP and senior advocate at Supreme Court. We've also got Sanjay Jha, spokesperson for Congress. We've got Amita Mukhopadhyay, former Director General at CAG, Hartosh Singh Bal, political editor for The Caravan, and of course in the studio with us is Jitendra Bhargava, former Executive Director, Air India. Sanjay Jha, I'm going to come first to you. Praful Patel in his interview to Times Now says that it wasn't just his decision, there was an EGoM involved headed by P. Chidambaram. There is still no defense as to why 40 extra planes were actually decided to be ordered.
Well, let me answer your question by actually quoting to you the Supreme Court verdict. That is so central to the entire discussion that you have been doing on Times Now over the last couple of days on Mr. Vinod Rai's book. The Supreme Court has categorically mentioned that the prerogative belongs to the government in terms of pricing of natural resources, and auctions or competitive bidding is not the only route. That by itself completely trashes both the 2G number of 1,76,000
Mr. Sanjay Jha, let's talk about the planes.
Number of coal of 1,86,000.
Let's talk about the planes, Aviation Minister and Praful Patel.
That is central.
No, what is central today to this discussion, this debate here on Sunday evening is what prompted the order of 40 extra planes?
I said at the beginning.
Why did the Aviation Minister allow it?
I said it is linked to it. Let me explain to you. That exposes the astronomical absurdities that were floated, that were actually nothing but fantasy numbers.
No, these are
let's not talk about the entire book by itself or the 2G scam or the coal scam.
Let me explain the linkage to you.
No, let's limit this to Air India. Let's limit it to that specific meeting that happened in August of 2004. And what has been said about the then Aviation Minister. Let's just limit it to that. Let us not go into the details of 2G and coal scam. That is for another day and another debate. The point here is, did or did not a certain aviation minister nudge for a proposal, and was it an overall EGoM's decision? Is it then everybody that has to be blamed here?
Well, you could have saved yourself a lot of bother. You have just let me continue. The point I was trying to make, which is linked to Mr. Praful Patel's answer on your channel to Arnab that he gave yesterday, was the job of the CAG is to look at the functioning of the operating procedures, financial,
the very Supreme Court that you quoted, Sanjay Jha, and said that the CNAG is not just an accountant, it's also the conscience keeper of the nation. So the question is, who approved?
Well, let me explain to you.
I have a former director of Air India with us in the panel today, Sanjay Jha, and he says, he also says that the decision was entirely of the ministry. The former civil aviation minister says it was a decision that was also endorsed by the EGoM. The question is, why didn't the civil aviation minister question the purchase of 40 extra planes when he knew very well that Air India cannot afford it?
Anand, I'm just answering your question. Please try and understand. You need to have this discussion in a context. Otherwise, you'll have nothing but,
let's get to the point. Let's get to the point. We have other
panelists. The point I'm making is, it is the job of the government. I'll give you an example. It is a job of the government to decide as to whether the telecom sector needed a subsidy.
No.
Man could have low
Sanjay Jha, hold on. I'm going to bring in Jitendra Bhargava, and he's going to rebut your argument straight away.
I'm coming to the issue of airplanes.
Getting into the technicalities which are not material to this.
On the issue of airplanes, let's look at it. Whether
Air
the
India had a turnover of rupees 8,000 crore in the year 2004-05.
To buy large aircrafts for a better
How can a company...
Let's listen to the former Air India director, Sanjay Jha.
With a very modest profit, with no reserves virtually, order aircraft worth 38,000 crore. Airline industry, we all know, works on wafer-thin margins of 1 to 2%, the best of airlines in the world. How was it that anybody submitting a proposal, and ministry's job is, as he very rightly says, is to scrutinize. There are ministry bureaucrats who are on the board of Air India. There is a minister who gives approval to these kind of proposals. That how would you repay the huge debt that you are taking? That is the crux of the whole problem which has crippled Air India. Now coming to the EGoM specifically, you see Mr. Patel made a very spirited defense that he went to the Prime Minister and asked him to constitute an oversight committee and EGoM, empowered group of ministers. Now, what he has done is to have misled the nation. I have the minutes of both the oversight committee and the EGoM with me. There is not a single reference to any discussion taking place with respect to the number of aircraft being ordered. Now, question is very clear. these people who were on EGoM had no domain knowledge of the aviation sector. Now, when you say that EGoM, with Chidambaram named specifically, turned options into firm order for 15 of these long-haul aircraft. Now, you know what is the value of these 15 aircraft? $2 billion. Now, imagine EGoM functioning in such a casual manner that you take a decision for $2 billion in one meeting. Times now, I did a story some time ago that 80-90 EGoMs were constituted by the UPA government. Many of the EGoMs did not even meet.
Right,
and here is a specific case where one EGoM takes a decision.
Let's get Sanjay Jha to respond on that, sir. He's got the minutes of the meeting. Are the minutes now lying? Or is it true that there was no discussion on buying of excess of 40 aircrafts in that specific EGoM?
Well, let me tell you that yesterday you had Mr. Praful Patel categorically and explicitly tell you that all the decisions that were taken followed a certain procedure and process, while people who were empowered to take the decisions took them. Now, if anybody feels that there was a decision was wrong, 1 minute, what stopped the CAG to file an FIR earlier? By the way,
what stopped the minister from raising the bogey?
Even today,
what stopped the minister from saying, hello, Air India cannot afford this? What stopped the EGoM from saying $2 billion?
That's exactly.
Can Air India afford it? Why? What stopped? What stopped? What stopped? You just said.
That's exactly the point.
You outlined the role of the CNAG.
That's exactly the point I'm trying to make on your channel. And now suddenly
you say that they should also go and file an FIR.
Try and understand that decisions which are taken include not just, the question of buying how much aircraft. You could be getting a substantial discount. There could be many other structures to a deal. I mean,
but that is the failure we are talking about. That the whole scrutiny did not take place impartially and without pressure being exercised on the people who were supposed to scrutinize. It is a blunder that cannot be covered up by any kind of false defense.
Sanjay Jha,
a decision to purge.
No, we just stay on.
For example,
just stay on, Sanjay Jha. I'll come back to you. I'm just going to bring in the other panelists. We did
not want revenue maximization.
No. The arguments cannot differ in different cases.
The gap was so huge that under no circumstances, Mr. Jha, can I explain to you? To repay the debt on 38,000 crore, the installments of interest, Air India needed a turnover of 75,000 crore if you consider the profitability factor of airlines like Singapore Airlines and British Airways. Now, and mind you, 75,000 crore is not even the turnover of all Indian carriers, 6 of them put together. There was just no way that Air India could have paid.
Right.
It was it was an open and shut case. The ministry failed because when one board member raised the question of business plan, how will you fund it? He was transferred summarily within 2 hours, even before he reached.
We'll come to that in just a bit. We'll come to that in just a bit. But Aman Sinha, here's the thing. In the case of 2G, the decision was entirely of the minister. In the case of civil aviation, it was the EGoM and it was endorsed by everybody. Now, something doesn't add up in both the cases, isn't it? And you can't do a flip-flop in either.
Oh, absolutely, Anand. And first, let me correct my friend, Mr. Sanjay Jha, who's unfortunately hell-bent on misquoting and misinterpreting Supreme Court judgments. In fact, even in 2G cases, all the allotments were cancelled. And the government is entitled to make a policy, but in guise of policy, they cannot commit an illegality. And if they commit, then courts will strike it down as they have been doing. Anyhow, without getting into more details, let me just point out at the outset that when the NDA government, previous NDA government left office, Air India was the biggest domestic carrier and was in a relatively good financial health. Now, in past 8-10 years, due to series of flawed, commercial and illegal decisions which have been taken by the Civil Aviation Ministry and the UPA government, the Air India became one of the worst performing airlines all over the world. Today, we have debt running to around 40,000 crores. Losses are 16,000 crores. Every day, 7 crores is only paid to service the interest which is accrued on debt.
True.
So this is this, and at the point when Mr. Praful Patel left office, Air India slipped to 5th, the last rank among the domestic carriers.
Yeah, hang on, Sanjay Jha.
So it clearly shows and clearly reflects that there was something seriously wrong.
True.
And the CAG report from 2005 to 2010 on aviation sector also clearly points out was what Mr. Vinod Rai told to Arnab in his interview, which was namely that there was the decision to purchase these 68 aircrafts was totally a flawed decision. It was a commercially totally unviable and untenable decision.
Correct.
And this was also vindicated and reiterated by the financial advisor who was moved out within 48 hours of giving that opinion.
Right.
So therefore, this is a very serious case and the government intends to...
Right. I know you made your point. I agree. But
yes,
I'm just going to bring in Amitabh Mukhopadhyay, also former Director General of the CNAG. Mr. Mukhopadhyay.
No, but just let me finish.
Yes, quickly. Okay, 30 seconds, Aman Sinha. Go ahead, please.
No, I was saying that this is a very serious case and government is considering it, and I'm sure the government will investigate it at the right point in time. Absolutely.
Right. Now Mr. Mukhopadhyay, was there pressure on the CNAG? Do you agree with what Sanjay Jha says, that why didn't the CNAG flag it and he's putting the onus back on the CNAG? And do you agree with the Prime Minister, the former Prime Minister, who says, I did my duty, but I don't want to comment on what the former CNAG Vinod Rai has to say?
Let me just say two things before I come to the specific question you've asked about the PM. In this particular case, I don't think the PM was in the wrong, in the sense that the PMO sent back the EGoM approval to the Ministry of Civil Aviation to inform and go ahead with the agreement. They did not really meddle with it. But the two issues which are very important in the case of the acquisition of aircraft are, first of all, the sharply rising trend of oil prices, jet fuel oil prices. From 2003, they skyrocketed, and the entire trend shows you that nobody in his right mind would have been wanting to increase the number of aircraft to be purchased, unless they were preparing for some kind of a world war, or where you need, you need a Luftwaffe, or you need the British force or something like that, where a war has broken out or something, you need this kind of a national carrier to salvage itself and the nation. So look at the fuel prices, the jet fuel prices skyrocketing right from 2003 to 2005 when the decision was taken. So Praful Patel was not in his right mind to advocate the purchase of more aircraft. What he did, you see, the word nudged
right,
is
Mr.
being
Amitabh,
played
I
about
think
with.
the point that you're trying to make here is of the kind of situation that was there when you talk about the aviation industry that didn't really justify this decision, and the situation just worsened. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, there was a story which also said that Mr. Roy Paul, the aviation secretary, wrote to PMO, Hartosh Singh Bal. You want to come in on this and say and tell us that whether it was just the CAG report itself or there were other indicators that something was terribly wrong with this decision?
Look, I think by now we know enough of what happened in the sector. You go back to the Radia tapes, you look at the kind of aircraft that were to be ordered, you look at the change in specifications, but I think Jitendra Bhargava put it very precisely. How will you take a decision to fund a certain number of aircraft if you have no hope at all of ever recovering that amount from your operations? And irrespective of the fact whether the EGoM understands the technicalities or not, this indicts both Praful Patel and the entire EGoM, including Chidambaram. Can't they do the simple maths? Do you sanction 2 billion and not ask the question, how will this money be recovered by the airlines? On what basis was this sanctioned? On what basis did Praful Patel come up with this absurd proposal?
Well, let's ask Sanjay Jha that. Sanjay Jha, your rebuttal's ready now. You've got 3 different points to give an answer to.
No, I'll keep it very simple. Capital intensive industries like airlines or hotels,
Mr. Mukhopadhyay, I'll come to you. Please wait.
A lot of capital funding, you tend to have longer gestation periods. I mean, you might have an economic slump which results in low hotel occupancy. Doesn't mean that new hotels don't come up. So there is a certain forecast that you make. Nobody can predict a war. Nobody can predict an oil price change. And let me give an example here. After 9/11,
Sanjay Jha, with all due respect, could you predict an approval of $2 billion in just
they went down and they came up. Now, 1 minute.
No, can you predict an approval of $2 billion in just one EGoM meeting?
Some have done well. Some have not done well, and some are making very good profits as well.
So why wasn't the decision done in 2 phases as was suggested by the board?
Why?
Sanjay, I understand the board had actually suggested that you order the planes in 2 different phases. If you can't predict the way the circumstances are, and they can change at any given point of time, keeping in mind the global environment, why did we have to go ahead and order 40 planes, extra planes altogether? We could have done it in phases.
If I can just clarify, it's not a question of just 40 additional planes being ordered. What you have to look into is that there was 18 short-haul aircraft and 10 long-haul aircraft being ordered earlier. Later, this 10 figure went up to 50. So you are going up 500 times as far as the long-haul aircraft is concerned. And that is what has crippled Air India. Now, you cannot make use of these aircraft. Imagine if these aircraft had been delivered and there was no delay in Dreamliner manufacture, it would have been mayhem as far as Air India is concerned. You wouldn't have known. And today, what is Air India doing? Just because they have to justify a decision of aircraft ordering, because the bureaucrats are still loyal. Let me explain to you. They are giving affidavits in the court. They're trying to justify and therefore using Dreamliner for short-haul sectors. It's a long-haul plane. How do you use it for domestic sector? But they're trying to justify the use of the aircraft.
So and as you're actually trying to retrofit something that you've been saddled with.
It is going to cost the airline humongous amounts because there are cycles of maintenance. So every takeoff landing constitutes a cycle. So when you operate a 1.5 to 2 hour flight, you complete the cycles earlier. So it's a maintenance cost that you get onto it. Now, nothing of this kind has been done. So whether it's the bureaucrats or Mr. Praful Patel and the people who were heading EGoM, etc.,
why didn't those who were part of the aviation ministry, part of Air India, make a hue and cry about it?
Good question.
Why didn't they come out and say it that time? Why are people speaking out now? Why is it mentioned in a book later, Mr. Jitendra?
For corporate governance, we have been talking about this independent directors. Air India had one independent director on the board, Mr. N. Vagul, former chairman of ICICI Bank, a financial man. Imagine he kept quiet. He did not utter a word to say that red flag the issue that sorry, you cannot place an order worth 38,000 crore on a turnover of only 8,000, and when you are making a double-digit profit.
So who's to blame? Aren't the officials within Air India, all those bureaucrats also equally to blame because they did not come out and make a hue and cry saying that listen, you're saddling us with something which is a dead duck, which is going to sink us all together.
And then the whole deal was being done in secret. See, let me give you one example which I quoted in my book on how board meetings were being done during that
However
period.
It was, sir, everybody is making noise after everything has happened, and that's the question. Why is it happening later? And not just that, I have a bone to pick. And when somebody got shunted, because they made a hue and cry about it, even before they reached the airport, you receive calls that that person has been shunted. Yeah. Why did everybody keep quiet?
Oh, please, let me. I have said it earlier when I released my book. Air India did not have a culture of speaking up.
Why?
Now, question is, when Mr. Sunil Arora wrote a letter to the cabinet secretary, forewarning that we are being pressurized to toe a certain line on the aircraft deal. Now, what happened? Now, a lot of people have been saying on the release of these books written by bureaucrats that they should write while in service or speak out while they're in service. You just have to study the career trajectory of Mr. Sunil Arora since he wrote that letter, and you will know what kind of treatment. On one side, government did not pay any heed and corrected the situation. On the other side, you hounded that bureaucrat. What a shame.
No. So that's very easy. No, you get hounded for honesty. So that's why let's not speak up. Is that right? How fair is that, Hartosh Bal? If former ministers are at fault, then so are the bureaucrats. So are those in Air India, because they allowed all of this to happen and nobody made a hue and cry about it.
I wouldn't dispute it.
No, and Mr. Mukhopadhyay, you had a point to make, isn't it? How is it true that the offices of the CNAG were actually being constantly hounded to remove that word nudged, and there was constant pressure to try and keep the ministers out of it?
Look, I don't think that is the main issue here, the issue of being nudged or not nudged. Presumably, the word nudged has been used by Mr. Rai to refer to the meeting held by Praful Patel as the minister in August 2004 or so. So that was above board, it was communicated. The proposal or his suggestion to buy aircraft, more aircraft, was communicated officially to the board of Air India. So I don't think there is much that is wrong in talking. Nudged may have been an unfortunate word, but that's not the issue. The issue really is, look at the EGoM. The EGoM headed by Chidambaram kept the negotiation committee of AIL outside the room when they negotiated the entire deal. The negotiation and the price and the agreement was not, that's what the CAG's report is actually saying. The CAG's report is basically saying that the negotiation process was completely flawed, the way the chronology went. The negotiation committee gets superseded by the oversight committee gets superseded by the EGoM, and finally negotiations are held without the technical team, the representation of the Air India in negotiations with Boeing.
Aman Sinha, do you realize the impact of what Mr. Mukhopadhyay is saying? You know, do we realize the impact of what Mr. Mukhopadhyay is saying and what these the minutes of the meeting say, Aman Sinha? An approval of $2 billion plus in one meeting, and that too chaired by somebody who's a former finance minister. And can we say that nobody knew about the numbers? Can the civil aviation minister, who himself is an industrialist, not know the numbers and the impact of what it would have on a company like Air India?
Praful Patel is misleading.
Yes, Anand, and in fact that is the most important point, that this decision was taken, the decision to acquire about 68 jumbo aircraft was taken without devising a plan how to utilize them.
Just wait on, I'll come to you.
What
Mr.
was this decision taken for? You know, if this was...
Yeah,
Anand, the most shocking aspect was that this decision of about $5 billion of buying these jumbo aircrafts was taken even without assessing where to utilize them and how to utilize them. So therefore, it is not a bona fide decision which went wrong. It is a decision, which at that point in time also he was aware that it is bound to go wrong. There is no two ways about it.
Yeah,
and he was aware of the financial health of the Air India and Indian Airlines. So therefore, this decision was not a bona fide wrong decision. In fact, this is a decision which he was quite aware that without devising any plan, if you go ahead and without understanding the consequences, what it will bear upon the airline, it will give a death knell to the airline. It will it will be relegated to bankruptcy and debt trap. That is what we were seeing the airline in that state of affairs.
Is that the case, Mr. Mukhopadhyay? So you were quoting something. Aman Sinha, Mr. Mukhopadhyay had a point to make. He's quoting some details, so I'm just going across to him. Sanjay, I'll come to you after that.
Yeah, the detail.
No, I just want to add one more thing,
Anand, 3.2.6
just if you can just allow me to finish,
7, 8 and 9, 3.2.6 to 3.2.9, and the details show that the PIB approval in October 2005, on the basis of which Praful Patel is saying that this was all done by many committees, actually approved the firm purchase of only 35 aircraft, and they left 15 optional option to be exercised by the AIL board or AIL management, depending on the market situation. What is the market situation PIB is seeing? What is the market situation or assumptions that everybody is talking about in all these approvals of these committees? They're talking about skyrocketing prices of fuel, the inability to realize the revenues, the rationalization required of the entire airlines that the government owns, and so on. So Praful Patel has no business to mislead by saying that this committee approved, that committee approved, that committee approved.
So very quickly, Sanjay, we are running out of time. Right, Mr. Mukhopadhyay, your point taken. Sanjay, we've now seen Mr. Mukhopadhyay give you some instances. Jitendra Bhargava has done that, Vinod Rai has done that. Are you still going to stick to your argument that the due processes were indeed followed?
I'll really appreciate if I get at least a minute of uninterrupted time. Let me give you one example of a ridiculous statement that I read, which is being attributed to the CAG in this entire...
No. Let's stick to what Mr. Mukhopadhyay, two former bureaucrats have raised on the panel today.
I'm answering that question. Let me explain that to whoever is on your panel. The point is the CAG has made a statement that the way the Air India could have been made profitable was if the Indian travelers paid more airfare for both traveling from outbound and inbound, by
no,
the
he's horribly wrong on it.
foreign airlines.
Sanjay Jha, again, that's the issue, Sanjay Jha. Point is, the Congress today on the panel has been quoting from something which the panelists today have. You have not directly addressed what the panelists today are saying. I have run out of time here on this.
I've answered your question. If that is the CAG's,
on one side, Ministry allowed or ordered 68 aircraft to be purchased by Air India. On the other hand, it was recklessly doling out bilateral seats to foreign carriers. And so by the time Air India aircraft started arriving in July 2007, there was saturation in the market. And so it is a clear attempt at murdering Air India. Forget anything else.
Well, gentlemen, we have to wind up this Sunday 9 p.m. debate on that note. We're way over time. But what has happened is two panelists, two former bureaucrats on our debate panel today have raised further questions, and they have countered what Praful Patel told Arnab Goswami while speaking to him. So thank you for joining us. This will follow on into Monday and Tuesday because this is becoming bigger with each passing minute. Thanks for joining us this evening.